Chapter 2 of Little Lucy's Wonderful Globe. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording Jennifer Goldsmith. Little Lucy's Wonderful Globe by Charlotte M. Yonge. Chapter 2 Visitors from the South Seas. "Miss Lucy, you're as quiet as a mouse, not in any mischief," said Mrs. Bunker, looking into the museum. "Why, what are you doing there?" "I'm looking at the great big globe that Uncle Joe said I might touch," said Lucy. "Here are all the names just like my lesson book at home. Europe, Asia, Africa, and America." "Why, bless the child! Where else should they be? There be all the oceans and seas besides that I've crossed over many's a time with poor Ben Bunker, who was last seen off Cape Hatteras." "What, all these great green places with Atlantic and Pacific on them? You don't really mean that you've sailed over them? I should like to make a midge do it in a husk of a hemp seed. How could you, Mother Bunch? You are not small enough." "Ho, ho," said the housekeeper, laughing. "Does the child think I sailed on that very globe there?" "I know one learns a name," said Lucy, "but is it real?" "Real? Why, Missy, don't you see it's sort of a picture? There's your photograph now. It's not as big as you, but it shows you. And so a chart or a map or a globe is just a picture of the shapes of the coastline of the land and sea, and the rivers in them, and mountains and the like. Look you here." And she made Lucy stand on a chair and look at a map of her own town that was hanging against the wall, showing her all the chief buildings, the churches, streets, the town hall and market cross, and at last helping her find her own papa's house. When Lucy had traced all the corners she had to turn in going from home to Uncle Joe's, and had even found little frizzles for the 5 lime trees before the vicarage, she understood that a map was a small picture of the situation of the buildings in the town, and thought she could find her way home to some new place, suppose if she studied it well. Then Mrs. Bunker showed her a big map of the whole country, and there Lucy found the river, and the roads, and the names of the villages near, as she had seen or heard of them, and she began to understand that a map or a globe really brought distant places into an exceedingly small picture, and that where she saw a name and a spot she was to think of houses and churches, that a branching black line was the flowing river full of water, a curve in, a pretty bay shut in with rocks and hills, a point jutting out, generally a steep rock with a lighthouse on it. "And all these places are countries, Bunchy, are they? With fields and houses like ours?" "Houses, aye, and fields, but not always so very like ours, Miss Lucy." "And are there little children, boys and girls, in them all?" "To be sure there are, else how would the world go on? Why, I've seen them by swarms, white or brown or black, running down the shore as sure as the vessel cast anchor. And whatever color they were, you might be sure of 2 things, Miss Lucy, that they were all alike in." "Oh, what, Mrs. Bunker?" "Why, in plenty of noise for one, and the other for wanting all they could get to eat. But they were little darlings, some of them, if only I could have got at them to make them a bit nicer. Some of them looked for all the world like little bronze images Master has got in the museum, brought from Italy, and hadn't a rag more clothing neither. They were in India. Dear, dear, to see them tumble about in the surf! Oh, what fun, what fun! I wish I could see them. Suppose I could." "You would be right glad, Missy, I can tell you, if you had been 3 or 4 months abroad with nothing but dry biscuits and salt junk, and maybe a tin of preserved vegetables just to keep it wholesome, to see the black fellows come grinning alongside with their boats and canoes all full of oranges and limes and shaddocks and coconuts. Doesn't one's mouth fairly water for them? Do please sit down, there's a good Mother Bunch, and tell me about them. Come, suppose you do." "Suppose I did, Miss Lucy, and where would your poor uncle's preserved ginger be, that no one knows from real West Indian?" "Oh, let me come into your room, and you can tell me all the time you are doing the ginger." "It is very hot there, Missy." "That will be more like some of the places. I'll suppose I'm there. Look, Mrs. Bunker, there's a whole green sea all over the tiniest little dots. There can't be people in them." "Dots? You'd hardly see all over one of those dots if you were in one. "That's the South Sea, Miss Lucy, and those are the loveliest isles, except maybe the West Indies, that I ever saw." "Tell me about them, please," entreated Lucy. "Here's one. Its name is Isabel. Such a little wee one." "I can't tell you much of those South Sea Isles, missy, being that I only made one voyage among them when Bunker chartered the Penguin for the sandalwood trade, and we did not touch at many, being that the natives were fierce and savage, and made nothing of coming down with arrows and spears at the boat's crew. So we only went to such islands as the missionaries had been at, and got the people to be more civil and conformable." "Tell me about it," said Lucy, following the old woman hither and thither as she bustled about, talking all the time, and stirring her pan of ginger over a hot plate. How it happened it's not easy to say. The room was very warm, and Mother Bunch went on talking as she stirred, and the steam rose up, and by it seemed to Lucy that she had a great sneezing fit. And when she looked again into the smoke, what did she see but two little black figures, faces, heads, and feet, all black, but with an odd sort of white garment around their waist, and some fine red and green feathers sticking out of their woolly heads. "Mrs. Bunker, Mrs. Bunker!" she cried. "What is this? Who are these ugly figures?" "Ugly?" said the foremost, and though it must have been some strange language, it sounded like English to Lucy. "Is that the way little white girl speaks to boy and girl that have come all the way from Ysabel to see her?" "Oh, indeed, little Ysabel boy, I beg your pardon. I didn't know you were real, nor that you could understand me. I'm so glad to see you. Hush, Dawn, don't bark so." "Pig! Pig! I never heard a pig squeak like that," said the black stranger. "Pig? It's a little dog. Have you no dogs in your country?" "Pigs go on 4 legs. That must be pig." "What? You have nothing that goes on 4 legs but a pig? What do you eat then besides pig?" "Yams, cocoanut, fish. Oh, so good. And put pig into hole among hot stones. Make a fire over, bake so nice." "You shall have some of my tea and see if that is as nice," said Lucy. "What a funny dress you have. What is it made of?" "Tapa cloth," said the little girl. "We get the bark off the tree, and then we go hammer, hammer, thump, thump, till all the hard thick stuff comes off." And Lucy, looking near, saw that the substance was really all a lacework of fibre, about as close as the net of nurses' caps. "Is that all your clothes?" she asked. "Yes, till I am a warrior," said the boy. "Then they will tattoo my forehead and arms and breast and legs." "Tattoo? What's that?" "Make little holes and lines all over the skin with a sharp shell, and rub juice that turns it all to blue and purple lines." "But doesn't it hurt dreadfully?" asked Lucy. "Hurt? To be sure it does, but that will show that I am brave. When father comes home from the war, he paints himself white." "White!" "With lime made by burning coral, and he jumps and dances and shouts. I shall go to the war one of these days." "Oh no, don't," said Lucy. "It is horrid." The boy laughed, but the little girl whispered, "Good white men say so. Some day Lavo will go and learn, and leave off fighting." Lavo shook his head. "No, not yet. I will be brave chief and warrior first, bring home many heads of enemies." I think it's nice to be quiet," said Lucy. And won't you have some dinner?" "Have you any baked pig?" asked Lavo. "I think it is mutton," said Lucy, when the dish came up. "It is sheep's flesh." Lavo and his sister had no notion what sheep were. They wanted to sit cross-legged on the floor, but Lucy made each of them sit in a chair properly. But then they shocked her by picking up the mutton chops and stuffing them into their mouths with their fingers. "Look here!" she showed them the knives and the forks. "Oh!" cried Lavo, "what good spikes to catch fish with! And knife! Knife! I'll kill foes! Much better than shell knife!" "And I'll dig yams," said the sister. "Oh no!" entreated Lucy. "We have spades to dig with. Soldiers have swords to fight with. These are to eat with." "I can eat much better without," said Lavo. But to please Lucy his sister did try, slashing hard away with her knife and digging her fork straight into a bit of meat. Then she very nearly ran it into her eye, and Lucy, who knew it was not good manners to laugh, was very near choking herself. And at last, saying knife and fork were great good, but none for eating, they stuck them through their great tortoiseshell rings they had in their ears and noses. Lucy was distressed about Uncle Joseph's knives and forks, which she knew she ought not give away, but while she was looking about for Mrs. Bunker to interfere, Don seemed to think it his business and began to growl and fly at the little black legs. A tree! A tree!" cried the Isabelites. "Where's a tree?" And while they spoke, Lavo had climbed up the side of the door and was sitting astride the top of it, grinning down at the dog, and his sister had her feet on the lock going up after him. "Tree houses!" they cried. "There we are safe from our enemies." And Lucy found rising before her, instead of her own nursery, a huge tree on the top of a mound. Basket work had been woven between the branches to make floors, and on these were huts of bamboo cane. There were ladders hanging down made of strong creepers twisted together, and above and around the cries of cockatoos and parrots and the chirp of grasshoppers rang in her ears. She laid hold of the ladder of creeping plants and began to climb, but soon her head swam, she grew giddy, and called out to Lavo to help her. Then suddenly she found herself curled up in Mrs. Bunker's big beehive chair, and she wondered whether she had been asleep. End of Chapter 2. Recording by Jennifer Goldsmith, Kearney, Missouri.